This kind of felt like it came out of nowhere, but what's going on? What do we know right now?
Right. So we have these two regional banks, Zions and Western Alliance, and shares of those are tumbling today after they said that they were victims of fraud on loans tied to the same borrowers. And those have both forced charge-offs on the debt. And it's also fueling a lot of concern, which is, I think, what we're seeing in the broader sector, that there are more cracks emerging in credit markets.
You used the phrase cracks. We were doing some market entomology yesterday, picking up on what Jamie Dimon said about the potential of there being more than one cockroach in the environment. And I wonder sort of how we should look at these two events and complement both the comments that he made about the bankruptcies that we've seen and this latest news about these two regional banks.
Well, they still remain quite isolated incidents as far as we can tell. So the borrowers in this case, they were not First Brands, they were not Tricolor, but a group of investment funds, it seems, that have faced a number of fraud charges. But yes, while they appear to be isolated events, of course, this feeds very much into Jamie Dimon's comments of are people doing the right amount of due diligence on borrowers in this kind of late cycle moment in the economy where credit spreads are very tight and valuations are high. That's the kind of environment that encourages a lot of dodgy behavior and froth. And are these borrowers examples of that? So that's the through line, even if they're isolated incidents.
I don't want to jump to conclusions or like get ahead of ourselves, but I just think about during the great financial crisis in the lead up where there, instances where people said, well, it's just isolated, incidences. So I'm just wondering, again, what are you keeping a watch on? Other banks? Like, how are you guys figuring out whether this is indeed isolated or there's something more? I mean, are our regulators, are we expected to hear from regulators on this?
Well, this is the interesting thing with the smaller, in terms of what we're looking at, these are smaller banks.
Right.
So, JP Morgan took this 170 million charge tied to Tricolor, the subprime auto lender that collapsed in very dramatic fashion. That meant nothing to the bank. And actually, to be fair to Zions and Western Alliance, it doesn't seem like this is going to be a huge issue to either of them, even though, the shares are down. But for smaller banks, a hit like this is obviously much more consequential. And so if lots of smaller banks are experiencing borrowers, particularly, borrowers that are connected to the subprime or lower income consumer or lower income consumer, then, it could fuel a lot more pain. And actually, Jamie Dimon said that too, that if there is, so many of these borrowers have been able to load up on debt that when things start to turn, it's going to be worse and a lot more painful.
Lastly here, a stark change in tone from the conversation we were having with you yesterday about the big banks and their prospects, how they did in the third quarter as well. As we look ahead now to earnings season, which will involve, of course, a lot of these smaller and mid-sized regional banks as well, how much does this color the conversation, what we expect to hear from bank executives as they do those earnings calls?
Yeah, I think it hugely colors it because they will be asked about this. They will have to disclose this kind of thing. Maybe they feel a bit of cover now that some of these banks have disclosed this, but I think it's going to be one of the number one things that investors are looking for as smaller banks